Going back a little bit to the story I said in one of the other tapes about the videos about the Grand Canyon, as I say, the poem in the book says basically, if you were to shield the canyon from the wind, from the weather, from the rain, there'd be no character, there'd be no beauty. Beauty comes from dealing with stuff and learning. Um, Last night in the group, there was a lady who came from the East Coast, came out here, um, kind of sophisticated, used to being in the middle of the big city in New York in this case, and ended up in a little town here when she and her boyfriend ended up into a domestic violence fight. It was verbal mostly, not physical. Most of the domestic violence is verbal abuse. Um, and she was in shock because um, the officers showed up, happened to be women, young ladies, and they were impressed with her boyfriend and listened to him 100%. And she said, before I knew it, she said, I'm the one that called the police because it was getting abusive. And wham, I'm in the back of the patrol car and I'm taken off to a detention center. And she said, I spent 17 hours without being able to eat, without being able to use a phone, um, without, you know, she said it was just horrible. She said, my family's back east, so it wasn't like they could run over and say hello and help her out. It was a very difficult situation. So she learned more about herself, about life. But she said last night, and she's one of the ones that's getting some good stuff out of it. She said, I didn't realize there was another side of the world like that. She said, being locked up in the detention center when I couldn't do anything and I couldn't call anybody. And, and I listened to some of the other people, women in there, who were talking about abuse and were talking about drugs. And she said one of the gals, went on and on about, hey, uh, don't worry, you're going to be back with this over and over and over. And my client was like, no, I'm not. But the other gal was one who obviously, she said, oh, yeah, I come and go. And so she learned about a part of the world that we didn't know. Heck, when I worked out at Needles, California at the hospital, um, small little town, we had a lot of Section 8 people in difficult situations, and I would go twice a month to work in the stroke unit. And it was kind of interesting because we had people we called frequent flyers, and they would show up. There were a lot of our local drug addicts and depressed people and people that weren't going to really function really well in the rest of the world. So they would show up at the emergency room, every month or so to get cleaned up for a day or so, have an excuse to come in, detox for a day or so, and that was it. And they were frequent flyers, and we knew they were going to be back, even though they would say, oh, I'm so grateful, thank you, things are going to be fine. In my domestic violence batterers program, I have a group of women and I have 3 groups for men. And there's a number of people who say, you will never see me again. And I'm like, we'll see. And there are some people I think that no, we're never going to see again. And then there's others who will be back. I tell people when they come into the group, for instance, the perpetrators, I deal with the perpetrators who feel they are the victims of the law and the victims of change and manliness and manhood, whereas 25, 35, 40 years ago, they wouldn't have to be here because we didn't have these laws. And men knew their roles and women knew their roles. And, remember there was a classic wedding vow that, we marry, to stay together, till death do us part, to love, honor, and obey each other. That doesn't fit much anymore. But the guys in the group are like, often can't believe that this happened either. As I tell them when they come in, I said, a third of you are going to make some good growth. You're going to see from everybody around here. You're going to learn some things. You're going to think, you know what, life could be different. I've had a number of people who were big in entertainment industry, who were executives, whatever, who said, I learned from watching the other people some things that I don't want to do. So I grew. The second third, I tell them, you know, you guys, that second third of you that are just going to make changes because you don't want to get in trouble again. You don't believe that you did anything wrong. You are the most wonderful, loving, caring person in the world. I hear that all the time. But the truth is, you learn that things are different. And so you're going to be careful about not getting in trouble again. That's all there is to it. But it becomes sort of a behavior modification because while you're trying to stay out of trouble, you do make some changes in the way you handle things. And the third come in as assholes and they leave as assholes. And I have no control over that. I've had some people be back 4 times for domestic violence cases over the 25 years I've been doing this. Quite a few who come a second time. And then there's others that I'm sure go off and do something somewhere else. But we don't always learn. Okay? So, we'll catch you later. Have a good one. Good night.